I recently had my first ever visit to Japan. 1 week in Kyoto and 1 in Tokyo, culminating in a live performance with my group Balmarais. I spent most of my free days exploring the city, its cuisines and cultural pillars. And of course I had to investigate the innumerable and highly specified and organized record shops and some of the kisas as well. La Voce in Kyoto was a standout classical shop that only deals in original pressings. Bar Quasimodo in Kyoto and Bar Martha in Tokyo were 2 of the better kisas I found. I started out the trip thinking I'd just bring home a couple of select LPs to fit in my carry-on, but that escalated when I hit a couple of the disc union shops in Tokyo, resulting in the need to purchase an extra bag to get everything home safely. We start off in Kyoto at Plastic Soul Records. This tiny shop off the beaten path had most genres, but the largest selection in jazz. The first selection is Stan Getz and the Cool Sounds. This is a 1980 mono pressing from Verve, Japan, originally recorded in California in 1955. This is a clean and quiet pressing of mellow, cool West Coast jazz, featuring a couple of Gershwin compositions, 2 by Glenn Miller and Ellington's Flamingo. Jimmy Rouse, Lou Levy, and John Williams play piano, with Bill Crow and Leroy Vinegar sharing duties on bass. Shelly Mann, Alan Levitt, and Frank Isola on the drums, with Bob Brookmeyer on trombone. The pressing is clean and quiet, though it's quite dark and muffled. There's a lack of high-end information, but still highly recommended for the fans of the mellow and cool tones of Stan Getz's saxophone. Sticking with the cool theme, this is Cool Heat. Anita Oday sings Jimmy Giuffre arrangements, a 1959 recording from Hollywood, California, again a mono pressing from Verve, Japan. This includes some standards like Mac the Knife, Gone with the Wind, and The Way You Look Tonight. On this and the Stan Getz, there's a listed price of 2,300 yen, which equates to about $15 in today's conversion. This is the first recording I have of Anita Oday, who was a very reputable vocalist in her time. Highly recommended for fans of Billy, Ella, Doris Day, Julie London, Peggy Lee, Beverly Kinney, Helen Merrill, etc. This is quintessential end-of-day cocktail music. It's not challenging in the slightest. It does come across as a little hokey and dated, but the music is so approachable and easy. Now in Tokyo, the first shop I hit was the Disc Union in Ochanomizu, the classical shop. I had a big stack of records, but it ended up whittling down to just 2. The first is Callas Sings Lucia, excerpts from the opera by Donna Zetti. This was produced in Naples in 1835. This is a British mono pressing. I believe it's the second pressing from the late 50s. The pieces are sung in Italian, and she's joined by 6 other singers. The vinyl is mostly quiet, but does have some intermittent noise and pops throughout, and some notable distortion on some of the more bombastic resolves. It came housed in a thin glossy jacket, with the old-style flip-over cover. I only have a handful of opera recordings from Callas, and would be curious what you all might recommend for other recordings of her singing. The second album I found at the Disc Union was Elgar's Cello Concerto, with Jacqueline Dupre backed with Janet Baker's C Pictures. This is a His Master's Voice 1965 mono recording with the London Symphonic Orchestra conducted by Sir John Barbirolli. This is a clean copy, but there's some significant background noise throughout. After a couple of cleanings, it definitely plays a little quieter. The Cello Concerto was Elgar's final masterpiece before his death in 1934. There's a great amount of power in this music, coupled with the expressive bow techniques of Dupre. I'm not sure a proper or decent all-analog reissue exists of this music, so I'm pleased to have found this original mono copy. Just around the corner from the classical shop is the Disc Union Jazz of Ochanomizu. The first selection is a 1989 OJC jazz record, Howard Rumsey's Lighthouse Allstars, with the Hampton Hawes Trio, Bernie Kessel, Shelly Mann, and Bud Shank. This is a live recording from the Irvine Bowl in Orange County with 1,200 people in attendance, though the actual Lighthouse bar itself still remains in Hermosa Beach just up the coast. It's cut quite hot, a dynamic and visceral pressing. I believe it's 140-gram vinyl, here remastered by the great Phil Delancey. originally recorded in 1955. This music is riddled with vibrant auxiliary percussion and also features an amazing rendition of Monk's Roundabout Midnight, with Barney Kessel's guitar singing lyrically over the rest of the music. Here is another OJC, this one from the early 80s, again cut by Phil Delancey. Originally released in 1959 on Riverside, this is the West Montgomery Trio, a new dynamic sound, guitar, organs, and drums. Recorded in New York City in 1959, this features the incredible guitar of Wes Montgomery, paired with Melvin Ryan on organ and Paul Parker on drums. And the repertoire on this album is sultry, lending itself to some beautiful late-night listenings in my future. The low-end bass of the organ is palpable, in contrast to the shimmering guitar played from Wes's right thumb. I've spent years searching for the Analog Productions double 45 cut of this, but for now, this all-analog cut from OJC will do just fine. Still at the Disc Union Jazz and Ochanomizu, we're moving on to a triptych of Charlie Parker records. The first of which is Swedish Schnapps. This was introduced to me just a week prior by Yoshi, the proprietor at Bar Quasimodo in Kyoto. This is a compilation of sorts for Parker, here a 1981 polygram pressing from the Polydor KK Japan label. The horns are alive here, with Miles Davis's trumpet joining in with Parker's alto sax. Max Roach's drums are explosive, with piano duties being shared by Walter Bishop Jr. and John Lewis. Teddy Kotick and the legendary Ray Brown round out the ensemble, sharing duties on double bass. Next is a mono Savoy recording of Charlie Parker, the Immortal. This features the maroon Deep Groove Savoy label, originally released in the US in 1955. As far as I can tell, this is an early pressing, but probably not the original. Similar to the Swedish Schnapps, we have Miles Davis again on trumpet, this time being joined by Dizzy Gillespie, Max Roach again on drums, John Lewis, Duke Jordan, and Bud Powell on piano, with Jimmy Butts, Curly Russell, and Tommy Porter on bass. Each track has about 2 or 3 different variations on takes. It's fun to hear the slight variations between them all. It's just classic, straight-ahead traditional bebop, like no one but Parker can do. The last one from Parker features his orchestra, Night and Day, an early USA Verve mono pressing. Here we find some tasteful renditions of Autumn in New York, Stella by Starlight, and Dancing in the Dark, among others. Of the 3 Charlie Parker records I picked up on this trip, I think I resonated most with this one. Otherwise in my collection, I previously only had this large Savoy box set of Parker, so it's nice to have these individual albums as well. On this Night and Day pressing, the horns are really front in the mix. The string has a sort of old-timey softness, but it's quite endearing. You can only imagine listening to this while skipping down a busy Manhattan Avenue at night, with the sidewalks bustling with street vendors, buskers, and electricity in the air. This is all-time classic music. Moving on to another forefather, this is Lester Young in Paris. Recorded in 1959, this is a 1980 Verve Records Japan release from the Polydor KK label. When I purchased this, I didn't realize this is the same music as Sam Records' reissue of the Le Dernier Message Lester Young album, which I already own. This earlier release does have a slightly different track listing. The mono imaging of this pressing is immediate. Lester Young's tenor saxophone and Kenny Clark's bombastic playing of the drums just envelop the whole room with their sound. If you are a fan of Lester Young, I would recommend seeking out the Sam Records Le Dernier Message pressing. Saving my favorite for last, a true grail in my want list, this is Duke Pearson's Tender Feelings. This is a 1989 Blue Note Toshiba EMI pressing, originally recorded in that great year of 1959 at Van Gelder's studio in Inglewood Cliffs. This is a trio jazz recording, with Duke Pearson on piano, Gene Taylor on bass, and Lex Humphreys on drums. Michael Hobson did do an all-analog reissue cut of this for Classic Records many years ago, but that remains quite elusive and high-priced. I would imagine the tapes must be lost or damaged, since this title hasn't been included in either the Music Matters, the Blue Note Classic, or the Tone Poet series. This is a not often talked about recording an album, but one that I've really come to love over the years listening to it on streaming platforms. I was overjoyed to see this in the bins at the Disc Union, completing the small stack of records from my first trip of Japan, the first of many I hope. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.